Call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Good morning, Mr. Cunha,
Yes.
Mr. Clark, Ms. Zimmerman, Ms. Brown. Yes. Mr. Harrell, Ms. Lopes, Mr. Hofdahl,
Here.
Mr. Savage, Ms. Pitt, Mr. Rios, Mr. Baki.
Here.
Ms. Austin Tibbetts, Mr. Sanders, Ms. Deming, Mr. Sanchez, Ms. Nebaker, Mr. DeHart, Ms. Holmes. Here. Mr. Liba, Ms. Bigby. Here. Ms. Agers. Here. Mr. Tristo.
Here.
Ms. Fast, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Cryer,
Here.
Ms. Matthews, Mr. Troost,
Here.
Mr. Delgadillo,
Here.
Mr. Cantu,
Absent.
Mr. O'Brien, Mr. Smith, Mr. Maderos,
Here.
Ms. Deming is here. Okay, through the chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Manuel, would you lead us in the pledge? Please. Manuel, speaker on. He's saying something.
Oh, are they?
Oh,
I missed it all.
oh, wow.
Wow. Okay.
What happened?
Their speaker wasn't on, so we.
Oh,
You said.
thank you, Manuel. I think. We have the minutes of December 3rd, 2024. Any comments on the minutes or corrections? From the north? None? South? Fresno? All right, minutes approved as submitted.
Mr. Cantu, I will call for public comments on the minutes prior
Thank you.
to.
I'm glad you're keeping track of it.
Thank you. Is there any members of the public in Bakersfield that would like to make comments on the minutes?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. We don't have copies of the minutes in our packets. At least I don't.
They got emailed. I was trying to see if they got emailed.
Yeah, they were. I remember,
They're never as a handout here.
They were.
they
We
were.
don't usually print them in the handouts, to my knowledge. We have them in the email packet for review.
Right.
Would you like us to print your copy?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I normally have the minutes when I print the entire packet that I got last night. But I printed the packet and I noticed it wasn't even in the email packet.
Oh, okay.
It
They
wasn't.
weren't in yesterday.
It
wasn't
was,
yours?
okay. Okay,
Oh, okay, well then maybe I better learn how to
Mr.
use my computer.
Mr. Chair, and
So there was two emails. Yesterday's email didn't happen.
and we can definitely take a look if there's a wish by the CAC to have it printed as well as part of the printed packages. The other thing I could offer, if there is interest by Mr. Cunha or anybody else, I mean, we'd be happy to put the minutes up on the screen, but I'll leave that up to members to, as to what you'd like to see right now.
No, I'm not okay, but I am okay. If that makes any sense. But I think I would definitely trust the chairman of the board and also the members of the committee that have reviewed it. They were fine and there was no comments and stuff. I'm good with that, but in the future, I think it would be good to have it as part of it. So when we print the whole thing, I don't know why I printed and I don't know what happened, but anyway,
Okay,
thank you.
okay. Okay, Manuel. All
Okay.
right, so the minutes
To the
are
chair,
approved.
can I call for the public comments,
Oh, I'm
Mr. Chair?
sorry. Yes,
That's okay. Bakersfield, do you have any members of the public who would like to comment on the minutes?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Modesto, any public comment?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno? Seeing none and none online.
okay, thank you. Minutes approved as submitted. Chair comments. Only comment I have is 2025. We're at the beginning and Christmas is looming off in the distance. That's how fast things are moving today. Executive Director, comments.
Through the chair, actually, we do have to call for the item 5, the public comments.
You know,
so
I've
this
been
time-
doing this, I've been doing this for a year and I have yet to catch that.
That's okay. This time is made available for comments from the public on matters that are not on the agenda. It is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno? Seeing none and none online. And through the chair, just for the record, it does look like Mr. Clark has joined us as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I made my comments. Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just wanted to wish everybody a happy new year as well, and had a few items that I wanted to catch the CSC members up on, starting with an air quality update. I wanted to make sure you were all aware, and this is hot off the presses now that we've completed 2024, but we are now, as a region, able to show that we've met the 15 microgram PM 2.5 standard. So for those of us here all of us here who've been following these issues for a long time and working for many, many years to bring this milestone about, it's great news. So the Valley has been working on the standard since, the standard's a 1997 standard. And so, but for those of us who go back and understand, where the region started, and we were in the 20s of micrograms per meter cube for the annual PM 2.5 levels, we've been able to bring that down now to well below 15. So it's a huge milestone. We're going to be doing a little bit more on this as the data itself for 2024 gets certified and officially approved and submitted to EPA. But I wanted to make sure the CSC members were aware that we are now able to show that that standard is fully met. You may recall that we met the 24-hour portion of that standard several years ago, and the only remaining portion was the annual, and just a couple of places in the Valley that are all now able to show that the standard's been met. As we work towards the other standards that you hear a lot about, you'll get a little bit more update a little bit later here on the agenda with all the other work that's going on. But great news on that front. I want to also mention to you and really just express a lot of appreciation for the CAC taking prompt action to get our budget request, our own letter in for the farmer funding, for the alternatives to open burning funding. I'll give you a little bit of an update on the availability of that funding here for the short term. But we were able to get that letter out from the CAC to request that the state budget include funding for these critical programs. Thank you very much for taking very, very fast action on that. We also got our budget request letter in December as well. And you're probably following this, pretty closely, at least at the headlines level, if not more detailed level. But the governor is releasing the January proposed budget, the initial state budget, by this Friday. So by the end of this week, we should be seeing what the governor is putting in the budget. There has been a little bit of news around this. You may have seen the headlines yesterday around at a very high level, the governor basically stating that there is not going to be a deficit. Basically, it's a balanced budget that will be proposed. We've had 2 years of major kind of deficit budgeting the last 2 years. So with this proposed budget, it does appear that at least with what's being proposed, that I think a combination probably of maybe higher revenues and maybe some lower spending potentially. We're not sure. We haven't seen the budget yet, but there's going to be some kind of budget being proposed at the end of this week. Hopefully it includes some of the critical funding that supports the everybody from, from residents to farmers to businesses as we keep transitioning to new technologies and practices. We'll see. But I do think that this budget process is going to definitely play out between January and much later in the year. So I don't think that, this is just the beginning, just to remind everybody, and we'll share more information as that, we don't have that detailed information today, but as that develops over time, we'll definitely keep the CAC updated on that. Another quick update for you is that in December, the study agency, so the San Joaquin Valley wide study agency accepted $200,000 in funding that our board approved as seed funding for some of the newer research that we'd like to do. As we keep thinking about the PM 2.5 standard, you may recall that the Valley-wide study agency is a great place to host Valley-based research. It really helps us understand what's happening in the Valley, to look at new technology, some of the almond and other technologies. We've done a lot of really good work with the study agency. So the board did approve a transfer of funding to the study agency. And I think over time, as we advocate for more money from the state and federal government to help us with that kind of research, it's going to be important that the CAC be kept apprised of that. And you've always played a major role in supporting those Valley-based research efforts so that when we develop strategies, basically we have a good understanding of what works here, what's going to be effective, maybe what's not effective. There's a lot of unique challenges that we face here. And so that research has always been really important, as locally developed and in very close coordination with stakeholders here. So I just wanted to let you all know that that's moving forward, and hopefully we can have more funding and more conversations about how to do some really good research here. I see the mic turned. Mr. Chair, if I could allow maybe a CAC member to make a comment here. I see a mic turned on.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask, is there plans to develop a research program like we had in the early 90s where stakeholders got together and a complete research plan with CARB was developed in time frame? Is that on the books? We going to work on something?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dennis. And the short answer is yes. Now, the scale of it and the process by which it's developed, I think that's something that, we're certainly going to be taking, I think a lot of feedback on that. And you may recall that there was quite a massive research program. I know you were directly involved in that, as I know Mr. Cunha and some of the other members here were. We'd like to see, significant and policy relevant research done. We want to see that model used, the scale of it, where it's focused. I think those are the things that we're just at the very beginning stage now of having that conversation. So when we took this to the board at the study session, and then as a conceptual, and then in December for their approval, part of that item was really kickstarting that conversation that you're talking about, which is really developing the priorities, looking for other funding sources to help with the research, and then engaging with stakeholders to actually move forward with that kind of research. And it's everything from dealing with the Sigma issues, and supporting efforts, farmers and others that are dealing with some of those challenges, to understanding what is impacting PM 2.5 today versus 20, 30 years ago when a lot of this work was done. Looking at technology, some of the newer almond harvesting technologies is one of the areas that we know there's interest in the ag sector. So there's a few areas where I think there's conceptual discussions that are going on, but within the study agency, there's going to be more of what you're talking about, actually developing the research priorities, looking for the funding, developing the partnerships, and then at some point here soon, hopefully getting some what I call policy relevant work done, so the kind of research that will actually help us with developing our strategies here. And then just one last update for you all, which is that you may have seen, and I know we talked a lot about this with the CAC, there's a little bit of press around the ag burn phase out. The last phase of it did end at the end of last year. And so essentially, basically where we are today with agricultural open burning is that outside of a few limited categories, which includes diseased materials, there's some weed abatement, there's some levels of attrition burning, there's issues with wind and other kind of natural circumstances. There are some very kind of focused categories that there will be some limited burning allowed, but outside of that, orchard removals, vineyard removals, a number of other types of what were historically burned at some point along the way are now phased out, not allowed to be burned. And so there are alternatives to burning that we've been supporting here for a number of years. It's a very difficult phase out. It's something that we're still working very closely with Valley Ag on looking at those alternatives. We actually have funding available today. I want to make sure everybody here was aware that as you deal with your constituents, anybody that you know, that we are working very closely with Valley Ag to make sure that that funding availability is widely disseminated, that the funding is very accessible. We have a very short turnaround time on making that funding available. If somebody has, say, a removal and they have to deal with the material from that removal. So we are working very closely to outreach this issue, ongoing outreach, as well as the funding. If you have any issues or concerns, please let me know. We're always looking for opportunities to get the word out. And I think and going back to my first point, the advocacy on funding is going to be important. I think this budget year, we have funding today, but that funding will run out at some point. And it's going to be important that we keep looking for funding sources to assist with the transition. It is expensive to chip and deal with the materials. And as part of our advocacy, as I know as part of the CSCs as well. And there's a bigger effort that's going on kind of statewide to support the resources that are needed for this type of transition. So just wanted to let you all know about that, especially with the funding. And if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Samir, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Really just from a curiosity standpoint, we reached the target, as you just noted. In the long term, and I'm not sure what that is defined as, is the target at the long term zero?
Are you talking about PM 2.5? Is that your
Yes.
question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the standard as it stands today is 9 micrograms. That's the federal standard. It's not 0.
Okay.
Now the issue though that I think the part of your question I think is related to how do we actually meet a 9 microgram standard? What sort of technology or allowable emissions, say from vehicles, from agriculture, from whatever it might be, how do you actually go about meeting the standard? And that's a very good question. That goes back to my earlier comments around the research and understanding things like background levels. So what would, for example, the emissions in the region be in the absence of different types of activity? And because we do know, for example, that there will be some level of ozone, of PM 2.5, regardless actually of whether or not certain types of activities occur. And so I think that's why it's super important when you look at how stringent the federal standards have become as EPA has continued to update those standards. The science is super important so that we actually understand, like you're saying, I think, is it really zero emissions that's needed in different levels to actually meet that standard? Or as we're doing now in transitioning, right? What if you're chipping, for example, that's not zero. I mean, you're not burning anymore, but it's not zero emissions. I mean, there's still equipment emissions. There's still some particulate that's released when you chip or you work it back into the ground. So it's not that even the alternatives are zero emissions, or maybe use an air curtain incinerator. There's still emissions coming from that process as well. You're reducing emissions, but you're not necessarily getting to zero. It's helping meet the standards. But as we think ahead to like a 9 microgram standard, it's a very difficult standard. I know we talked about this quite a bit here before. What is it going to take to meet that standard? That's where I think we all need to be working on this very, very much in earnest in the next couple of years to really get a handle on that. I don't know if that answers your question, but
that's good. But which leads to the next question. What is the acceptable level? If it's not 0, is it 1? Is it 2? I mean, the district has done a great job. As I was saying earlier, I remember the days when the sky was brown or shades of brown. And today it's very clean. And there are movements to make sure that vehicles are clean and industry is clean and farms are clean and all that. But at what point are we okay with whatever the standard is? I mean, and the reason I asked the question is I'm familiar with the water district at the state level. Over the years, the standard kept changing and getting more stringent, and to the point where it's almost economically infeasible for municipalities and industry to meet the need without spending a lot of money, which then on the other side of the coin affects the economy of the whole state and the reason people and businesses are leaving. At what point do we reach okay?
That's a really great question. And I'll just maybe one closing thought on that, just from my perspective. I mean, from an air quality perspective, right? Because I don't want to mix this issue up with, I know a lot of the interest from the CAC on the some of the climate related mandates as well that are where you're reducing the carbon intensity, say through vehicles and whatnot. But from a local air quality point of view, first of all, we've reduced, to confirm your statement, we've reduced the population's exposure to high levels of ozone and PM 2.5 by well over 90%. We're in the very high 90s now in reducing what used to be higher concentrations of those pollutants. That's a great story. Are we meeting the latest health-based standards? Not all of them. And so what we work towards is trying to meet those federal standards. They're health-based according to what the federal government establishes. From that perspective, that's the goal. Now, it's a transition because every one of these standards has years into the future. So the 9 microgram standard that I mentioned to you is in 2037, 2038 or so, is by when the region would be expected to meet that standard. So it's not going to happen tomorrow, but if we're able to work towards it and hopefully meet it like we have with the 15 microgram standard, that would be the point in today's science that we would be able to say, hey, we've met the health-based standard. Now, all along the way, it's a journey. And that's the one thing that's really important, I think, for the members and the public to understand, is that all along the way, we're making incremental progress. We're getting health benefits all along the way. We're meeting standards. New standards will be developed. It doesn't mean that progress hasn't been made, that we haven't seen the health benefits from that. So I don't know if that's really answering your question, but there are standards that need to be met. If we don't meet them, there's sanctions and penalties that they're in addition to the health consequences. And we just continue to try to meet those standards with the tools that we have available to us. And it's very difficult. The balance is very difficult. The ag burn phase out is a big example of that, where we're basically, I think, stretching about as far as we can as a region to meet the air quality goals while still having, like you're mentioning, a viable economy, viable industry, viable ag sector, who's also under a lot of pressure from, like you're saying, water and other factors that we well understand. So every measure that we take is taking a look at all of those factors and just trying to move the ball forward as creatively as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I understand you guys have done a great job, as other agencies have as well, but I'm just curious, when do we get to the point where enough is enough? And I know I won't be here when that happens, and I doubt any of us are going to be here when that happens, but it's an ongoing process, and I'm glad you're making progress and all. Okay, is that it? Any comments from?
I have one comment. I just wanted to add that the standards that we're looking at, the federal EPA are required to review the national ambient air quality standards every 5 years. So when we ask, when will this end? Well, well, that's being too pragmatic. It'll end when there's no appreciable health risk associated with the concentrations of various pollutants in the air. And that's dependent upon the review that takes place every 5 years. So, well, they'll, in all likelihood, it doesn't occur every 5 years. It's usually a delay of a few years past that. But there'll be other standards being promulgated based on the health risk studies that come out. That's how the standards are established.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This Manuel, thank you.
Manuel.
Thank you, Samir. again, everybody had a good Christmas and New Year. First thing is, Samir, when we achieve these great accomplishments, as you described with the 15, I believe in 2008, 2007, we did a press conference with Jamie. And we did it here, I believe, at the Air District on accomplishments. And we letting from the, it came from the study agency processes of some of the goals. Are you planning to do some type of press event to let this governor and others know the great accomplishments that were made by this district and the industries and the people of the community? Will there be a press event to get out there? Because right now, nobody talks about, because it's new. At the end of the day, discussion, you met it. But it certainly warranties to give, like that sign on that wall, the credit of what the study agency did for you to get there in 93. So comment on that, or if you and Jamie and team is going to do a press event out at some monitor on the middle of I-5, somewhere, but something. Comment?
Yeah, so thanks, Manuel. We consistent with, and we do this, by the way, every time we meet a major milestone, we will do some level of announcement and press and event. And so we do definitely intend on doing that. Timing wise, it'll be a little bit later. It'll be first quarter of this year for sure. Part of it has to do with, data certification. And so this is preliminary. I'm announcing this as a preliminary announcement, but it does take a little bit of time, for all the filter data to come back. There's a process you have to go through to basically be more official about the what happened, say in the prior year. But we are working very hard on doing that as fast as possible with CARB. This is definitely a major announcement, a major milestone. We definitely intend on getting the word out about this. And it's just super important to recognize the value for the work that's done, especially as we keep asking for more. We just talked about a major initiative here going into the future. It's going to be impacting a lot of people. We have to show that when we make efforts, you get a result from that effort, and really let people know that the air quality is getting better. There's a lot of confusion, at times when these conversations are happening. And so it's part of our tradition to make that happen. So we will be talking more about that in the first quarter. And we'll definitely keep the CAC apprised of that as that develops.
Thank you. Second question I have, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Samir would be the study agency receiving the funds from the Air District for the 200,000. The study agency, absolutely a key integral part when you did the Seacoast and the SARMAP studies, somewhere 65 million. USDA just had finished appointing the Air Quality Task Force members. We don't know where that will lie now with this new administration, but in that goal, several people of the task force already have been communicating back and forth that we want to make sure that the study agency looks at what the USDA task force is going to recommend in those areas. And some of those areas means funding for more research like we did way back. So I think it will be very important for the study agency, and you're on that board. You've been elected to be on that board, along with 3 others of California. So we need to ensure that the USDA Air Quality Task Force definitely puts in the request to the Secretary through NRCS for the funding that it needs to help with this ongoing research for agriculture, and especially with Sigma, and especially with almond harvesting that people have been focusing on, and maybe some other activities. But I believe that our agency called USDA needs to be part of this funding outreach like we did way back when even NASA got involved and gave something like 6 or 10 million. So I just want to make sure that that's part of, that we include that in there with the USDA Air Quality Task Force, that we realize what part do we need to play with you in this air district. Yes, $200,000 covers a couple monitors for a day. But it's a great start because the board recognized the importance as you presented. So whatever the USDA Air Quality Task Force members can do, I think we want to make sure that we're part of what that number is that you need help with to make that ongoing research true, rather than a bunch of hypothetical legislative mandates by somebody. So I think that's going to be an important part, Mr. Chairman. I think that the USDA has to be a part of this, especially when it deals with agriculture. And we need to be funding that research as well, being that the district and industry puts money in, then our agency called USDA needs to be a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is Les Clark down, excuse me, in Kern County. I just
Yes.
sort of follow up with what Manuel said, and Samir, you know, the governor's budget, a third of that budget is dependent on the federal folks. And I think that probably if you want to raise some money, you need to head to Washington, D.C. and, you know, and have it earmarked as it comes down through the Air Resources Board. Otherwise, you're going to have an uphill climb this year. I mean, to say that we're going to have a real good budget, that's not going to take place. I mean, I can't speak for the governor, and I never would do that, but you just put numbers together. And what we've done in the past, you had a group that went back there and specifically raised money for this district for the different studies. And we were very successful. I think Manny brought up, I think, $60 million. I think that's what it wound up being, and be more. So, I mean, it's, if you want to raise money for the advancement of some of your studies, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's what's going to have to take place.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to
Yeah,
appreciate
go ahead.
and agree with Mr. Clark's comment. You know, I do think that the coalition, a coalition that has specific requests and can connect those to the need, you know, in this case, the Valley facing all these federal standards and mandates, you know, I think that is the approach that we need to take, you know. So the seed funding, I think the importance of the board's action is more about really just kind of trying to kickstart the work of a coalition to develop that agenda and to then do the advocacy work. And I couldn't agree more with Mr. Clark that what's going to require is partnerships and require stakeholders working with us on the plan, and then also getting out to policymakers, whether it's in DC, which we're happy to, you know, I already saw some hands going up. We'll see how the format of that might look, but you know, there's no other way to do it when it comes to funding. We have to make the case for it, and we have to have a strong coalition. We can't do it alone, and no individual stakeholder, I think, can do it alone. It's going to require valley-wide support. So I appreciate that comment.
Okay. Any other comments?
This is John Sanders in Kern County.
Yes, go ahead.
One other, you know, way of working with the different communities is if some of this funding were to be not sequestered from oil and gas, we could produce more equipment or have better equipment that fit into the criteria, which is something I do on a regular basis, try and have electric equipment or hydraulic equipment or anything to reduce pollution. And if we were to have that option in oil and gas to receive those funds, or, you know, instead of just ag alone, that would bring up a huge tax base. We'd be producing different, be able to employ people. You'd get more taxes by employment, more taxes by production. And it's just another avenue. I mean, we're going to do it one way or another, but it sure would be nice to be able to keep the masses going, making a lot of money, you know, buying stuff, getting sales tax, whatnot. All of these items would come easier if the oil and gas industries weren't penalized for their size of their companies, or if they had the option of money to electrify their fleets. And it's not readily available to oil and gas. It's easier for the other people to get it, the ports, the agriculture people. Those are the people who seem to get the lion's share of it, regardless of how hard someone works to get some grants for their company. Once you become a high priority fleet, people, they just want to cut you back, and they don't want to help you out anymore.
Thanks, John. I'll get circle with you if you're okay with that. Definitely want to respond to that request and talk about the on-road fleet, the off-road fleet. I know there's probably different types of equipment that you're talking about facing different mandates depending on, whether it's one or the other. And more than happy to look at, different funding sources for those, and just trying to figure out, how do we make sure that there is opportunity, in every sector. And I think there may be in some cases, but I also want to see, if you're facing barriers with some of those programs, then, how do we try to make them more, more accessible, or kind of respond to the concern that you're raising. So we'll definitely, if you want to, if you have specific ideas, please share them with me, or I'm happy to circle back with you to get more information from you.
Okay, any other comments? All right, let's move on to verbal report from Laura.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm not seeing the option to share my video, so I guess I'll just do this verbally. Good morning, everyone. This is Laura Carr. I'm an air pollution specialist in the Air Quality Planning and Science Division at CARB. So CARB did not hold a hearing in December 2024, so there are no board items for me to update you on today. However, I do want to give a brief update on Senate Bill 253, the California Corporate Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program. Back in December, the CAC had requested that CARB provide an update on CARB's SB 253 program. And CARB staff response was emailed out to the CAC yesterday, but I can also share it here just to make sure that everyone has that information. So CARB staff are just beginning implementation of the SB 253 program, including hiring new staff. And CARB may be able to provide an update on the program later in 2025. In the meantime, we shared a CARB website with the CAC group yesterday that was sent out by, that was sent out yesterday by the CAC clerk. So we want to make sure that everyone saw that information. There were also a couple of links in that information, in that email that went out yesterday. There was a link to more information about the program. There was also a link to an information solicitation that went out via CARB's listserv in mid-December. And that's, like I said, a solicitation for information and for feedback on CARB's implementation of the SB 253 program. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check out that email that got circulated yesterday. And that's all the update that I have for now, but happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Laura, this is Denise. I do have a question. In the very beginning, when Senate Bill 253 was approved, it was my understanding that our first reporting would happen in 2026, meaning that starting January 1, we would be gathering information that we're not quite sure what we're supposed to be gathering. So, and we brought this up in June and again in December and got the same answers that the program hasn't been developed yet. Am I true to report back that we will not be required to make a reporting in 2026 and that has been extended?
Yep, thank you for that question. I don't have an answer to that directly. I'm not program staff working on that program. I know Michael Benjamin is also on here as well. I don't know if he has a response to that or if that's something that we would have to take back to program staff.
Okay, I know that's the worry of industry, is that we're supposedly required to report on stuff that we don't know. It's taken the agency, we've asked for 6 months, so I would hope that the answer coming back is that reporting wouldn't start until 2027 and it would be for 2026's information.
So Denise, this is Michael Benjamin from CARB. Have you looked at the CARB website?
I started to look at it, but I know that there was a comment period, I think is February, but we just got it yesterday, so I haven't really looked into there. So if you have information that you could share, I'd appreciate it.
What we were provided with is what I've shared with all of the CAC. And so I would encourage you to take a look at the specific reporting requirements that are provided on the CARB website.
It's Mr. Chair, if I could just, I took a quick look at the documentation and just want to appreciate CARB for getting that out to the CAC members. I think there's a number of questions that are being posed in the process that CARB has laid out, and so I think the kind of feedback, Denise, that you just raised, I would imagine would be the kind of feedback that CARB is probably looking for, along with there's a range of different issues that are identified in the document. So, and I think there's until mid-February or so. So there's a little bit of a window here to go back, take a look, and hopefully, in that process, articulate all the, I know this issue's been on the agenda or been raised a number of times. And I think there's a lot of complexity, it sounds like to me, just kind of reading between the lines with what was put out there. So it would be important for stakeholders, whether they're on the CSC or anybody that that may be trying to figure out, the compliance path for these different mandates. Make sure you get the word out as well about CARB's process and the deadline of mid-February to get that feedback to CARB. I'm sorry, Michael, I didn't mean to jump on any. Hopefully that's consistent with what has been put out there. I just wanted to just amplify the importance of getting that feedback.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Samir. That's exactly right. That was the purpose of the information solicitation. And I know it's a lot that you all are having to navigate. But there's a recognition on the part of CARB that there's a need to have a dialogue on how the implementation of SB 253 occurs. And that was the purpose of the information solicitation that went out in mid-December. So I do want to the extent that you or others that you know of would be willing to engage and provide feedback through the link that was sent to the CAC yesterday, and provide that feedback by February 14th. That would be greatly appreciated. And I think that would tie into decisions made about reporting deadlines.
Thank you. I did have one other comment for CARB, not in relation to 253. So I don't know if they want to take all the questions for SB 253 first.
If we could, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. If we can, before you go, leave 253, Samir and the team, with the chair, if we can put a group together with the district staff and us and talk about this item and maybe have it's a public process, we understand that, to where we can maybe put our comments together and then have the CAC present them to CARB on what the group of CAC members and others may have in regards to that. Is that workable, Mr. Chairman, that you would go out on your letterhead and stating that these are the concerns that the CAC members have concurred and met and have discussed, and these are their issues they have brought up in concert, and what role the district would take in that, if that's appropriate. And so if there's a comment from Samir or Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. Samir,
Yeah.
is this a subcommittee we could put together or something?
Mr. Chair, I think it's certainly up to you and the the members on as to whether or not you want to have a subcommittee. So absolutely an option. I just want to be very clear, you know, that the air district, as far as I can tell, doesn't play
Any role.
a significant, if any, role in the implementation of these kind of corporate level. I think I'm trying to characterize this correctly, Michael, but basically, you know, beginning to end life cycle carbon footprint reporting that, you know, that and I can see the complexity. By the way, I have a very big appreciation for how difficult this probably is for what I believe are very large. Well, I don't want to mischaracterize, but basically, if your revenues are over, I think $1 billion per year, I believe you trigger the reporting requirements. So I don't know if all the members here are necessarily interested in that. I think there's probably generally an interest, I would imagine, but I you know, I think there is a distinct or a specific set of companies that would be obligated to report under this. I would imagine that subcommittee would need to be guided by somebody from CARB who can speak to the matter. I don't think that, you know, I wouldn't feel comfortable trying to educate that subcommittee on what these requirements are, because that we frankly don't know how they're to be implemented. So whatever process you want to put into place, that's fine. You probably would want to coordinate with CARB to some extent if they're available. I know that Michael has just expressed that they're still ramping up their own capabilities on how to, you know, kind of respond to these mandates. So I definitely just want to be, I mean, just respectful of your time. Is there a broader interest in actually taking a CSE position, kind of given its, you know, sort of specific aim here under this bill with the certain companies that would be reporting? It's not for everybody. It's not for every fleet or every company. So I'll leave that with you, Mr. Chair, as to how you want to do it. We're happy to, for example, help schedule a subcommittee meeting, but beyond that, it's not a whole lot that I could offer in terms of any technical expertise or any facilitation that we could really do without CARB support.
Emmanuel, what's your thoughts on a committee? What would be the purpose?
Well, if you don't want to call it a committee, I think it's the purpose is to educate, because $1 million is $1 million. And that $1 million discussion is something that many people don't know. Huh? $1 billion. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the error. I know what's $1 million to $1 billion. But I think it's to educate the CAC members, and that would come from CARB, on really what they have read into the report, being that we just got it and we're going to look at it. But we're going to have questions. And I think as representatives of the CAC to our prospective industries, it doesn't matter. I don't care if it was 20 billion. The issue is that we're here for a responsibility in this valley to our industries and to the communities. What that information is, to understand it betterly. And of course, coming from Michael's side, from his team, or from who's in charge of this 253, is to have maybe, let's call it, without calling it a group meeting, but an informational call with CARB and the right staff, and you can call in and zoom in or jump in a car and go to Sacramento. But the questions we have, somebody or people from within that staff would be able to answer our questions so that we have a better understanding. If we're going to comment or make comments as industries or businesses or whatever, or cities, we should know what we're going to be saying to and asking the questions, because those companies exist in this valley.
Manuel, I think what you're asking is for representatives from this committee to develop questions to submit. Is that what you're asking for?
Well, I think we have questions, but we need to have somebody that knows the program and is able to answer our questions so we can put to better response to what is being proposed. Right now, the only source we have is a website, and they've given us the information. Great. Now, if questions come up on that website, on that information, who do we actually physically talk to as a group, rather than emailing questions and answers of trying to get information? No, let's have our questions asked to a qualified staff at ARB so we can put together a better question so we understand it better. So it's to have have a persons or people that we can call. And so if it's a Zoom in call, a public outreach call that occurs at this time to specifically answer questions about 253, great. That's what I'm asking. Can that happen before the 14th of February?
Or no, Samir?
Samir, it's Michael. It would be Michael or his
Oh,
team.
Mike.
And I know Michael's not in charge of the truck roll. He's got enough other issues to worry about. But whoever the key directive staff person is that possible? And it has to go to CARB because this isn't a district law. I know that.
Mr. Chair, could I just make a comment? Dennis Maderas, what was the figure that you indicated, Samir? Was it?
Yeah, my understanding is that if the company has over $1 billion in revenues, that you're subject to the 253 reporting requirement, which is part of what's laid out in the questionnaire process that Michael was talking about. And I just wonder,
Along that line,
Yeah.
generally speaking, if we have an industry or a business that has a $1 billion threshold, they're going to have I would assume they're going to have their own in-house representative or consultant, or they're going to contact someone to see to it that there's compliance with what's been indicated. So to that extent, I would see what we should be getting is some type of review or some type of informational presentation at the next meeting, or something along that nature, just to give us an overview of what we're dealing with here, because the individual companies are going to be handling that themselves as to whether it's going to be something otherwise. So I don't know. I don't know if a separate.
It is, because if I'm charged, if I have to pay for this type of program, the end result is that company is going to pass that cost down to the consumer. What is that going to look like if in fact that happens, right? What is the complexity of the reporting and how much of the reporting has to be? I don't know. I'll tell you, we have enough in our plate to deal with as an air district, but we also have enough to deal with other issues in our industries, and especially for agriculture. We have to worry about feeding the world. We have to worry about the avian flu. We have to worry about all of
This
these
is
things.
getting
But
too wide.
yeah, it's too complicated. So we just need information. We just need information.
Okay, Denise wants to say something.
I took both of your guys' comments and kind of in one, like Manuel said, we need somebody from CARB who's going to be able to make sure that we're not assuming we're reading what's on the website and we're understanding it. But if no one has actually read or even understands what this rule is, federally, only public companies have to report this information. The state of California has decided to make and approve a rule that's requiring private and public companies, and you're reporting scope 1, 2, and 3. And if nobody knows what scope 1, 2, and 3 is, which there's a lot of people that don't, that's where we are in industry. We're being required to report stuff that we don't even understand because a lot of that data is not there. So for instance, tracking how many miles the person you buy your packaging equipment from, what's their level of miles to get to your place? How many miles are you going from your warehouse to the grocery store? All of that is a lot of data. So we do a lot of record keeping in that information, but no one out there right now is gathering this information, which is why somebody needs to say that we're not required to have already started 7 days ago keeping track of information that's not even available. So we do need a presentation on what is scope 1, 2, and 3, because we're at we don't even know. We got a regulation that we're supposed to follow. CARB's not even there to give us guidance because they're still developing it. But when it was first approved, it was stated in that rule that we were supposed to start reporting in 2026 for 2025 data. So I'm sorry if I sound a little upset, but we've been asking for 6 months. If we have a year to work on it and we can have these meetings, that's great, but nobody's giving us the answers we want. It's on the website. Read the website. That's not getting us anywhere. So hopefully we could have some type of meeting that is going to discuss what kind of data we're gathering, that we're reading it right, and what are the deadlines? If you guys are still implementing a program, how are you going to be ready to start accepting stuff in 2026 for 2025? And none of us are going to have that, because the other thing to keep in mind is that $1 billion, if you're a company, it's not just California money. If you're a company and you're in other states, it's all that money together is what that $1 billion is, if I read it correctly, which is why I would want CARB to tell me that if I'm wrong. There's also another $500 million clause in there. Those are all the things that we need to understand, because we as industry are required to meet these rules, but we don't even have the people creating the rules helping us figure it out.
Michael, any response?
Yeah, no, so I definitely hear the frustration. Very, very clearly, Denise. I have had numerous conversations with the program staff responsible for this program. They are stretched very thin. There are basically no staff and for this program yet. They are being hired at this time. And so we're in the very early stages of implementing something that the legislature mandated that CARB do. So we are doing the best that we can. We've provided you with the best information we have right now. I will relay your concerns back to the program staff, but they will not be prepared to speak on this until later this year. We would encourage you to respond to take a look at the questions, the 13 questions that were sent, and to respond to those by mid-February. But I will relay back to the program staff your desire to have better clarity on the program. That's all that I can do.
All right.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I understand that you guys weren't the ones that made this rule and it was put on your agency, but we're all ultimately the responsible party, and we're the ones that are going to be fined if we don't meet the requirements. But thank you very much.
All right.
I have another.
Mr. Chair, there's a comment in Fresno as well. Just want to let you know. Thanks.
Hi, Laura Brown. I know that this is a really big topic and we're kind of at the infancy of this issue, and there's kind of a suite of bills that went through when this passed. And so SB 253 has to do with the largest sum. So the threshold is the $1 billion. There was another one that was a little bit lower that is probably going to touch more of the Valley businesses. But I think what's important, why we would want to keep an eye on it, I don't know how hands-on we would necessarily need to be, but scope 3 is going to have to do with a lot of the downstream activity for these large businesses. So that will indeed touch almost any business in the San Joaquin Valley. And so everyone is going to be asked of individuals or companies that they're selling their product to provide a lot of very detailed information, which they're unaccustomed to collecting and documenting. And so I think that's where, we should keep this in mind. I don't know if there's immediate action. I would agree with Mr. Medeiros that those companies that qualify for 253 are going to have their own teams addressing these questions, but it is certainly an important issue going forward because it is going to have more and more touch points with the communities here in the Valley. That's it.
Denise?
Okay, if there's no more 253, I have a question to CARB, and I don't know if anyone else has been having these issues, but it's in regards to the TRU regulation. We received all of the stickers that needed to go on the TRUs, and we've already had 8 of them that have fallen off. So I've been asked, what is the process for replacing these? Are you able to have a second set available at our location? So when we do have this situation happen, we can put the sticker back on as quickly as possible. I don't know if anybody else is having the same issue, but that would be the question I would need an answer for.
Yeah, it's a great question, Denise. It's unfortunate that that's happening. The stickers are manufactured by a third-party contractor. I'll reach out to the program staff and let them know that this is happening and to see how widespread it is. But I think the first thing is for us to circle back with you as soon as possible about getting replacement stickers, and then also ensuring that, that you're not in any way enforcement actions not taken against you if you happen to have a sticker that's fallen off. Do let us know what the best way to circle back with you. I can do it through the CAC board clerk if you like, so that the entire CAC has that information. Would that be?
Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that as soon as possible. I'll do that today.
All right, yeah, any other comments? All right. Let's move on to the next item. Update on attainment plans and rules. Tim?
Just wanted to, I don't know if you've been introduced yet, Tim. Were you introduced at the last meeting? But because I wasn't here at the last meeting, I was out sick. But just wanted to let me introduce Mr. Chair and CAC members. Tim Franquist, who's a recent hire here at the Air District, but is no stranger to air quality. Tim's actually been working in the air quality space for many, many years. I won't put the number of years out there, but comes here with a lot of experience, worked in Arizona on a lot of non-attainment issues there with implementation plans, with rules, incentive programs, brings a lot of experience to this position. So we're excited to have him here and to give you these quick updates.
Thanks, Mayor. Morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today. As you heard, my name is Tim Franquist. I am the new manager for the air quality planning team. So I'll provide a brief update on our rule and planning development efforts. First, for the 1997 annual 2.5 standard, the district submitted a EPA attainment extension request from December 31st, 2023 to December 31st, 2024. This is a result of having clean air quality data for 2023, with all the air quality monitors shown below the standard of 15 micrograms per cubic meter. On the 19th of November, EPA finalized the approval of the one-year extension request, and the district's attainment date is now 2024. As we previously discussed, the preliminary data does indicate that we have met the 1997 annual 2.5 standard. The district will also be working with, to finish our air quality validation process, and we'll be working with CARB and EPA to get a clean data determination for the standard. Next, for the 2024 revised PM 2.5 standard, the district has been working internally on strategies to effectively address the more stringent 9 micrograms per cubic meter standard. This revised standard will be extremely challenging. However, the district will continue to work with CARB and EPA to evaluate the extent of this challenge, pursue needed research, and evaluate potential emission reduction measures as needed. CARB has scheduled a meeting for January 23rd to consider adopting staff designation recommendations for the non-attainment area for this standard. To that end, CARB is recommending that San Joaquin Valley be designated as a non-attainment area for the standard. If approved by their board, CARB will then submit the recommendation to the EPA. EPA is expected to issue the final area boundary designations in February 2026, and state implementation plans for the moderate area will be due about a year and a half later. Turning to rule development efforts, first, the district is committed to several coding rules to include contingency measures for the 2008 and 2015 ozone standard. The district recently held a public scoping meeting on December 5th to kick off the process. The district will continue the development efforts and will schedule an additional public workshop in the coming months. Second, the district is currently conducting a rule development process for Rule 4901, which is our wood burning fireplaces and wood burning heaters rule. Consistent with the commitments from the 2024 and PM 2.5 plan, the district is evaluating extending the wood burning season through March, as it currently ends in February. The district has also started an internal rule development process and plan to schedule a public scoping meeting in the month to come. Amendments will, of course, be taken in front of the governing board meeting in 2025. And thank you again for the update, or the ability to provide an update today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions in North? No questions. South? Fresno? All right, Tim, I guess there's no questions.
Make it easy.
Thank you. Moving on to the Citizens Advisory Committee Representative Jessica.
Yes, hello. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the group. My name is Jessica Olson. I'm the Director of Community Strategies and Resources, and I'm here to talk about appointments to the Environmental Justice Advisory Group. So as a reminder, the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, or EJAG, serves in an advisory role to provide advice, direction, critique to the district on our efforts to advance environmental justice in the Valley. In accordance with the district's environmental justice strategy, which was established way back in 2007, the EJAG is actually to be comprised of 13 members, and there's sort of 3 different buckets of types of membership. All of these members, by the way, are to be appointed by the district's governing board. 8 of the members serve in an at-large capacity. They are to be members that have demonstrated experience or interest in representing low-income communities, environmental justice communities, 1 from each county. 2 of the members shall be small business owners that reside anywhere within the Valley. And then the additional 3 members shall be CAC members. And traditionally, we've relied on CAC to recommend appointments from the CAC. Each of those 3 members shall be 1 from each of the 3 CAC interest groups. So currently right now, we have 1 vacancy. This would be for the primary representative for the city interest group representative from the CAC. We do actually have alternate representatives that serve on the EJAG from the CAC. So right now, all of the other interest groups, primary and alternate, including the alternate for the city interest groups, are filled. So it's just the 1 vacancy that we need to fill today. Richard O'Brien had previously been filling this role, but he has indicated that he won't seek reappointment on the CAC and therefore wouldn't be, of course, then up to represent the CAC on EJAG. So it is up to really turning it back over to you, Mr. Chair. I'll provide a little bit of background on EJAG, what EJAG is and kind of how we meet so folks can kind of maybe think about it a little bit. But it really is up to the CAC to recommend some sort of appointment. We meet 6 times a year. It's traditionally every other month. It's kind of around the holidays. We skip a couple of months. So we do meet in January and February, kind of back to back. It's on the 4th Thursday of every month. It's in person. It is a Brown Act committee. And that is in the evenings that we start at 5:30 p.m. And again, whatever recommendation comes from today, we'll take to our governing board for appointment. And with that, maybe I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, to maybe solicit any interest from your group or any questions folks have for me about EJAG and what it entails.
You know, every time you say that, I'm looking for a shield and a special power. It sounds so much like one of those guys. Anyway, any comments from anybody or anybody want to volunteer?
Jessica, who was your alternate?
That's me
Mr.
from the
Cryer
city.
is the alternate for the city representative chair or membership. Thank you.
Okay. Who else do we have from the city on the CAC?
Mr. Chair, if I could save the committee some time, I'll volunteer if anyone wants to second that or approve that.
I move.
I second.
There's no argument.
All right. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Please.
And obviously, Samir will be able to answer this. A lot of new members on this committee, but in the past, it's been sort of a complicated process when it comes to the city rep. It had to go before all the city councils, if I remember, or you guys have a group of city that gets together and then they would come up with someone, but I don't know if that's long gone by the wayside. You know, it seemed like 20 years ago, it was like 5 minutes ago, but I'm just bringing that up because I'm not sure the last time, you know, I used to help appoint some of the advisory committee members and we got all kinds of conflict with the cities at that time, saying they would appoint their representatives. And while I got you on while I got the microphone, I'd like to ask the Jessica, the Environmental Justice Committee still reports back to the CAC, is that correct?
I can take both of those, Les, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll start with the first question, then I'll get to your second as well. Yeah, so on your first question, I think that you're referring to, but let me know if I'm off here, Les, but I think you're referring to the process of appointing a city member to the CAC, which is still done. It is done by the special city selection committees that exist within each county. And so that process is one that, still remains, and I'm sure any of the city members that are here were appointed at some point to that process. Now the EJAC structure itself includes representatives from the CAC to the EJAG, and those recommendations are made here through the CAC through this kind of open nomination process here for each of the the individual interest groups there's one seat for each of the interest groups, today being the city seat, and we appreciate at least one volunteer today, and we'll see what the action is today, or the recommendation is today. The second question around the reporting structure, that the EJAG does not report to the CAC. They report directly to the governing board. Several years ago, this goes back at least 7, if not 8 years ago. So during the initial phase of EJAG, there was a reporting structure that involved the EJAG reporting through the CAC, pending sort of evaluation of how EJAG was doing, and kind of where on a long-term basis EJAG needed to be. It was recommended and the board approved that the reporting structure would no longer be through the CAC, although there is a very critical link here, obviously three members of the CAC being on the EJAG, as well as the dialogue that should be happening back and forth is needed between the CAC and the EJAG, but they do not report through the CAC. Just want to be very clear about that, and the change that was made about 7 or 8 years ago with that.
That didn't sound right. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Through the chair, before I call for a vote, I would need to go out to public comments for this motion.
Go
Are
ahead.
there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Fresno? Seeing none and none online. Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I can call the roll on the motion to appoint
Please.
Ms. Matthews.
Please.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cunha,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
What's her election statement? I don't even know who she is. What the chicken in every pot or what? I don't get it. All right, yeah, I'll vote for you, but I don't even know who you are, but I'll vote for you.
through the chair, to clarify, the motion is to appoint Patricia Matthews, who is a city representative for Kings County from the city of Lemoore. Okay. Ms. Brown?
I'll give it an enthusiastic yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hofdahl?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Pitt?
That was a yes.
Yes. Thank you.
I don't have a microphone, so.
Thank you. Mr. Baki?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Ms. Deming? Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Bigby?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Eggers?
Yes.
Mr. Tristo?
Yes.
Mr. Crier?
Yes.
Ms. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Troost?
Yes.
Mr. Delgadillo?
Yes.
Mr. Cantu?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
As a city representative from Tulare County, I was overjoyed to know that you volunteered because I was going to be uncomfortable as this went along. So thank you very much. And I am saying yes.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, motion passes.
All right, thanks. Congratulations. All right, let's move on to enhancements to public facing air quality tools. John. for John.
All right, thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science, here with Jamie Holt, Chief Communications Officer, and we'll jump into this overview of how we are planning to enhance our air quality tools. So as you know, a public notification during air quality episodes is really important, especially when we have wildfires, we have impacts to air quality for ozone and PM 2.5. Getting that information and word out to the public is really important. So many years ago in 2010, our governing board took action to launch the Real-Time Air Advisory Network, or RAN, accompanied with the Real-Time Outdoor Activity Risk, or ROAR guidelines. And this helped get the word out to schools, to the public about real-time air quality. They could see hour by hour what's happening through email and text. And then later on, a couple years later in 2012, we launched our mobile app, which provided that same information right on your smartphone to be able to see what's happening. And at the time, these were groundbreaking tools. Nobody was doing this, providing real-time information in this way. But a lot has changed since then over the last 14 or so years. Many other tools have been developed by public agencies, by private groups. And this interest is increasing with wildfires becoming more extreme. People are watching air quality a lot more frequently. And these new tools can often come with their own recommendations on what to do with different air quality levels that are conflicting with one another. This can cause a lot of confusion, as I'm sure you can see. So consistent with continuous improvement, we are looking at all these tools. What can we do better to make things more clear with what we're providing, the information that we're putting out there? And this builds off of a discussion with our board a couple years ago in 2022. So these tools provide information in many different ways. A lot of them are web-based, some are on mobile applications on your phone. They take different approaches in how they present that information. Some it's based on just the nearest air quality monitor. Wherever you're located, it looks for the nearest monitor and provides you the information. Some of the approaches are more based on modeled information. So it tries to estimate air quality in between monitoring locations. So you get this modeled air quality field. So wherever you're located, it looks up what it's estimated to be and provides that information to you. Some also use low-cost sensors like Purple Air. Other sensors trying to correct for the bias that could be within those sensors to give more information out there. The way they provide the information can vary between email or text or smartphone application. A notification pops up on your screen. And like I mentioned before, the information that they provide for what you should do to protect yourself or kids in the school can vary from tool to tool. Even the time frame of the data that they provide can differ. Instead of just hourly information, some can provide information sub-hourly. Every 10 minutes, they can give you updates. So of course, as you can see, there can be a lot of confusion for schools, for parents, for residents wanting to watch the air quality. Which tool should they use? What time frame? What recommendations should they be following? So that's the reason why we are looking at this closely to try to provide very clear information from the Air District's perspective on air quality. Just wanted to walk you through a few of the tools that are out there. This is EPA's Air Now system. This is very popular, very prevalent. This is on the smartphone app. There's a few screens here that we're showing on the left-hand side. This is the air quality dial. It's really simple. Between green and yellow and orange, the different colors, it changes based on hourly air quality information. The middle there is a map you can take a look at to see geographically how air quality could be varying across the region, and this updates every hour. Then on the right-hand side, that's the fire and smoke map. This is really helpful during wildfire season specifically, where they can show wildfire smoke in the region. It shows a lot more information from low-cost sensors, so you get a better feel for the spatial distribution of air quality impacts when we have wildfire issues in the valley. So this is very popular during the wildfire season. A couple other applications here on the right-hand side of this slide. This is an iPhone. So if you pull up the weather on your iPhone and you scroll down, you'll see an air quality number there. This is based on Brisometer data, which is on the left-hand side. That's the website they have. And this is a modeled approach where it's trying to model the air quality in between all the different air monitoring stations. So no matter where you're located, you pull up your smartphone, look at the weather, it can give you an estimate of your local air quality. Some other examples here on the left-hand side, that's the Purple Air website, as many of you are familiar with, showing all the Purple Air sensors in the region. On the right is Weather Underground. A lot of weather websites also provide air quality information. IQ Air on the left-hand side. This is popular. This shows international estimates of air quality. So not just in the United States, but you can pull up locations across the world. You get an air quality estimate. And then on the right-hand side, this is a tool called SJV Air that was developed locally here by CCAC, one of the community groups that is a combination of regulatory monitors and some purple air sensors in the area. And so just a few notes here about the.
Just to interject.
Yes.
Never saw that before. We're 61 moderate here in Fresno. Some air quality is similar to yesterday at about this time. Very good information.
Yeah. Easy, right at your fingertips. You can just pull it up, look at the weather, and you see what's happening with air quality. Yeah, it wasn't that way many years ago. Yeah, yes. It's in front of everybody's eyes now, way more than it used to be. So just a few notes here about the EPA AirNow system. Like I mentioned, this is really the preeminent system being used across the nation. It's been developed for many decades by EPA over the years. Lots of different improvements and features have come along the way. Just a few notes here on what's happened over time. This first started back in the 1990s when it was just a ozone forecast, what the pollution of ozone could look like nationally. In the 2000s, they started to bring in more real-time data, so you can pull up a map and see what's happening across the nation. In the 2000s, they started putting more information in there about continuous particulate matter monitors. That's when PM 2.5 and PM 10 first began to be monitored in real time as opposed to just a filter-based approach. And then going forward in the 2010s, the mobile app was developed, became much more friendly. 2020, the fire and smoke map became available through their collaboration with the Forest Service. And then going forward in just recent years, there are notifications in the app. The fire and smoke map itself was in the mobile app, and there's wildfire information being readily available in the app itself. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Jamie to give us a history of the RAN program and what we're planning to do going forward.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. When we developed the Real-Time Air Advisory Network back in the early 2000s, the goal was to really use science-based data to inform the public and specifically schools about how air quality would change through the course of the day. You might recall prior to about 2010, we ran what we called the Air Quality Flag Program. A flag was raised outside a school site that was based on the forecasted air quality for the worst location in that county for the worst time of day. And we had some coaches and some teachers that could go into our website and would actually see, well, you've got a red flag hanging out outside my school, but I know and I can see that mornings during the summer air quality is significantly better. Or 3 o'clock air quality in a wintertime day is significantly better. So that flag doesn't really allow me to get students outside to have recess, PE, or sports practices. We got together with UCSF Fresno, the American Lung Association, some of our asthma coalitions, and we put together this RAN network to be able to give more fine-tuned data to coaches primarily and teachers to allow kids to get outside as much as possible, but to also protect their health when air quality was poor. The RAN system sent back in the day email notifications when air quality was deteriorating. Now that's turned into text messages. We have app notifications. When things are really intense, maybe we have a wildfire, we'll also back that up with press releases and emails that go much broader than just out to the schools. The RAN system is based on hourly data, and where it differentiates a little bit from that AQI scale that is baked into EPA's AirNow. The AQI scale is based on an 8-hour system for ozone and a 24-hour system for PM 2.5. The RAN system gives users information for each hour ranging from level 1 to level 5, and there's 24/7 access through our app or our website directly to our air monitoring. So you can actually see the data in real time, just about any time, and it's updated on an hourly basis. This is what it looks like. On the left, you see our website, and you can see trends over time. These are examples of when air quality is actually really great in the valley, but you see air quality is gets a little bit better in the morning and then deteriorates a little bit in the afternoon and then gets a little bit better in the evening. This is more of a typical spring summer pattern. That is a view of our mobile app. You can click on our mobile app and get a similar chart to what you see there on the website. We then came around and coupled our real-time outdoor activity, our RAN system with our real-time outdoor activity risk guidelines. These are basic guidelines for schools, parents, coaches, students, anyone who's doing anything outside on when they should be going outside based on the air quality. It takes into consideration the level of pollution, the duration and intensity of the activity. If you're out having a pads-on football practice in August, that's a different level of intensity than if you're a third grader having a 15-minute recess in April. There's different sensitivities that these different groups might have to ozone or PM. These guidelines really were the first of its kind. They've been utilized far and wide. The state of California actually heavily leaned on them back in 2018-19 when we had the big wildfire seasons. And they've really become a guidance statewide and even outside of California of kind of how to deal with some of these school-based activities and outdoor exercise and air quality. This is what the real-time outdoor activity guidelines currently look at. And I want to tell you that if you look down on the left-hand side, you see the different types of school activities. Down at the bottom, you'll see the concentrations that the different colored levels are at. And then within each one, you'll see the recommendations that we're giving that we're hoping, although it is up to schools as to whether or not they want to follow it, but that we're hoping schools will follow. Over the last couple of years, we've done some significant engagement with stakeholders because of this proliferation with additional air quality information that is easily accessible to the public and to schools and to parents. We launched an effort to engage with key stakeholders that's included public health officials, school administrators, athletic staff, school nursing staff. We've gone back to both some of the community-based organizations that helped us back in the early 2000s and also some new community-based organization to get their feedback on how do we make sure. This is the main question. How do we make sure that the public's getting information they understand and can use? That's really all we're trying to do. How do we make sure they're not getting confused? The stakeholders indicated overall support for us increasing our use of the AirNow, EPA's AirNow, and beginning to align ourselves with it as it has become more prominent. It is what you see on all these apps that we all have. It is what you hear about on any news outside of the Valley. We've done a really good job in educating our news to use RAN. And so really making sure that we're beginning to align our product with EPA's product so that we aren't confusing people. We also did a little survey when we were out. We go and talk to schools, especially during our back to school window. We're out at drop off and pickup, actually talking to parents. We did a little survey about 200 Valley parents, and of those, about 25% use the Valley Air app, which is great, but about 75% are getting their information somewhere else. So again, we want to make sure that we're not confusing people and that we're bringing these two products into line. So the next steps, we've taken this to our board and we're looking to now incorporate the EPA AirNow tools and their Nowcast and their real-time air quality index into our programs, into our outreach. We're beginning that integration and we're really looking at things like ease of use. What does it mean on our end with our tools to get that information into our app, onto our website? We're continuing to take feedback from stakeholders and then beginning to incorporate this information into our ROAR guidelines so that folks can understand kind of the difference and really overlap between these two. Last slide, this is what the guidelines would look like with this kind of integration. We're just beginning this process. This was just recently taken to our board. But as you can see, it still has in the pastel colors our RAN levels and the recommendations. Then we also have the AQI recommendations and the EPA's Nowcast. So we've lined them up and you can see kind of the directions we're giving, and there's an awful lot of overlap there, but it's just to make this clear for the public. And with that, I'll kick it back over to Samir and or the council or the committee for any questions.
Mr. Chair, just a closing comment, which is that just to echo what Jamie said, we're very early in the stage of moving forward with this. So the point of having it on the agenda here is this is a key stakeholder engagement opportunity. So if you do have any ideas, or if you think of anything that, any considerations that, should help kind of guide, this process moving forward, let us know. I think overall, just to really sum it up, the EPA real time, the nowcast AQI, it is being used in many sort of contexts right now, whether it's the state's athletic policies when it comes to high school athletics, for example. The actual policies point to the EPA nowcast AQI, not to local methodology. So there's already kind of an inconsistency that it's kind of an ongoing kind of a challenge locally. Even outdoor wildfire related OSHA and things like that all point to the EPA's nowcast as the tool to use, again, for uniformity, so the different regions aren't doing different things. So there's a lot of reason, I think, where it makes a lot of sense. And then I think lastly, the tool's caught up. I think the EPA tool has caught up. I think that they have a lot of capabilities. There's widgets and other things that they offer, which, by the way, make it really easy to integrate their tool into web pages. And if you all happen to, I've gotten questions whether a city, for example, at some point wants to integrate that widget into their web page. If somebody wants to easily see the real-time air quality, their tool has all those capabilities. So it's technologically feasible, and we think very doable. We're going to retain our app because the app is not only about air quality. You can use the app for other things like reporting, if you have a concern or need access to other information. So I think we're not going to cancel the app. I think we're still going to maintain it. It's going to I think theoretically we can integrate this data into the app while maintaining all the other functionality that we have in the app. So with that, Mr. Chair and members, if anybody has any questions or ideas, please let us know.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments in Modesto? Bakersfield? Fresno?
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question. John, on the weather app on our phone, how quickly is that updated? I mean, for instance, I read that off my phone just now. Is that within the last hour, within the last day? I mean, compared to what Jamie has indicated on the other apps.
It's at least every hour it gets updated. It could, I'm not for sure, but it could be less than an hour. It could be every 10, 15 minutes based on the modeled data that's being used to show the air quality on the iPhone.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Questions?
I only have one question. This isn't the public, this is manual. Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
To Jamie and to the team, and John and Samir. Is this being done through all of the other radio networks of different cultures, from the Hmong community to the Sikh community to the Latino community, rather than just, let's say, Univision, right? But let's say Telemundo or any of those. It is all synchronized into that part of it.
That is part of the plan, is to continue to make sure that all the information is accessible. And so I know Jamie's got a state leading kind of like we do more than any other agency does when it comes to language and other kind of accessibility. So that's certainly part of what the approach that we would use for disseminate the information. We're hoping that it's basically as seamless as possible. Like if you're a public member, what you're not having to do is do a bunch of work to understand this transition. That if you're in our app or in other information, the least you notice this or the less you notice it, I think the more successful we're going to be, because you're going to get recommendations. It's just going to be whatever we provide is going to be a lot more consistent with what you're also seeing in other tools as well, so that you're not just seeing differences and just getting confused as you look around at different information sources.
And you made a comment, Samir, about OSHA. is OSHA following your recommendations or your flow charts of what is healthy air, not healthy air? Or is OSHA, because we just had a discussion with OSHA about this issue called heat illness, flooding and smoke, okay? Is OSHA following the recommendations, or is OSHA thinking they're air quality specialists and health specialists and they're everything today? They're crime development agency and everything, workplace violence, they're everything. Are they following what you're stating, or are they coming up with their own answers? Do you know?
OSHA, and I don't know where they are today, but my understanding is there was a bill that was passed that established smoke requirements and directed OSHA to develop those. I believe that the requirements are prescriptive in law. So I think that there's a threshold, AQI threshold, by which there's certain things that have to happen. So we don't set those. I want to be very clear about this. That's an OSHA issue that's established by OSHA. It's in the statute. The only role that any of us or EPA plays is when you want to understand what's happening from an air quality perspective, there are tools that are specifically pointed to, in this case, the EPA Air Now tool, that are referred to the thresholds by which anything gets triggered and what happens when those get triggered. 100% OSHA issue. And I'm trying to remember if it was 175, I believe is the AQI level, but that's not established by us. It's not part of the RAN process. That's an OSHA level.
But they're at least looking at an intelligent tool.
Yeah, the law basically says that you need to use these types of tools as your basis for,
Okay.
but it's really just from an air quality level perspective. The thresholds and the actions were all established by OSHA.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
I was just curious if you can document how many downloads there's been of the app, like how highly utilized it is.
Yeah, last I checked, and this just is off the top of my head, I think we're knocking up on about 50,000.
Okay. Any more comments, questions? If not, let's move on to enhancements. Nope, let's receive and file the 2024 annual report. Mark.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Chair and members, Mark Montalongo, who is the program manager that oversees this program. This is a report that's presented to the board and was just recently presented to the board. A very important activity that we work with cities, counties, developers on throughout the year. I'm going to ask that he give you the concise version of the report, if you're okay with that, just kind of given where we are on the clock here. Go ahead, Mark.
All right, thanks, Samir. Good morning, Mark Montalongo, Program Manager, Policy and Government Affairs. This morning, I'll present the 2024 District's ISR Annual Report. The district's indirect source review was obviously first in the nation rule on indirect sources. Indirect sources are development projects that attract new mobile source emissions, such as commuting truck fleets and off-road equipment from construction activities. The rule was initially implemented in 2006. The goal of the rule is to mitigate growth in emissions of NOx and PM10 from development projects, both from construction-related activities and ongoing operational related activities. The bulk is operations. The rule promotes the use of clean air design features, but if required emission reductions are not achieved through on-site measures, developers pay an off-site mitigation fee. All off-site mitigation fees collected by the district are used to fund clean air emission projects in the valley. The slide contains a summary of rule applicability. One applicability mechanism is based on the land use approval process from a public agency along with project sizes. If the approval process with the public agency is discretionary, the thresholds identified under the first slide, under the first bullet there, are what's used to determine if the project is subject to the rule. Another applicability mechanism is for large projects. For these, if the project exceeds a certain size threshold, the project is subject to ISR regardless of the public agency's approval process. This mechanism was added in a 2017 rule amendment process. There's also a third applicability category under the rule, which is for transportation and transit related projects. The rule breaks down project emissions into two categories, construction and operations. For emissions related to construction, which focus on tailpipe emissions from off-road equipment, The requirements are to reduce NOx and PM10 emissions by 20 and 45% respectively, compared to the California fleet average for the same type of equipment. For operations, which are based on a 10-year period, the rule requires reductions of NOx and PM10 by 33% and 50% respectively when compared to the unmitigated emissions. As mentioned, emission reductions through project clean air design elements are a key part of the ISR program. Through the application process, the district provides a list of air quality improvement measures that developers can implement to reduce emissions from the project site. These air quality improvement measures are continually reviewed to ensure they reflect the latest technologies and practices. Since the majority of emissions from development projects are from mobile sources, much of the focus is on utilizing clean construction equipment, clean operating fleets, and reducing overall vehicle miles traveled. The benefits of implementing on-site clean air measures result in emission reductions achieved immediately and are permanent. Those reductions directly benefit the local community. It reduces or eliminates the need for developers to pay off-site mitigation fees. This slide, there are some examples of the use of off-site mitigation fees that are collected by the district. The funds received are invested in the valley through the district's grant and incentives programs to reduce air pollution in the valley, which consist of some of the examples that are listed there. For example, replacing older and high polluting school buses, grants for the purchase of electric vehicles, and so on. As far as this year's activities, we received 263 ISR project applications. Through the assessment of these applications, the emission reductions total over 2,100 tons from the use of on-site clean air project design elements and over 2,000 tons from off-site mitigation fees. In this reporting period, the district collected $4.9 million, which includes $3.5 million from ISR funds and $1.4 million in VERA funds. Since 2006, the district has taken numerous measures to outreach and assist with ISR compliance. We've held public workshops, outreach meetings with cities and counties, held trainings on various specifics of the ISR program, and held follow-up educational workshops with agencies and stakeholders since ISR began in 2006. We also maintain a Rule 9510 small business assistance line for assisting developers and public agencies on a daily basis, while also requiring Rule 9510 on district internal forms such as dust control and compliance notification. In addition, through our work in the California Environmental Quality Act process as a commenting agency on development projects, we send out hundreds of letters per year to agencies in the Valley to inform them and the developer of ISR applicability, its requirements, and available resources on a project-by-project basis. Since initial implementation began in 2006, over 22,000 tons of emissions have been reduced via on-site clean air design elements that directly benefit local communities. And through these off-site mitigation fees, over $180 million has been invested in over 16,000 clean air projects, which have resulted in over 20,000 tons of emission reductions in the Valley. As with many of our programs, the district is continuously seeking to further enhance the ISR rule in light of new technologies in federal, state, and local regulatory environments surrounding mobile source emissions and indirect sources. Along those lines, South Coast AQMD has adopted a warehouse rule that focuses on mobile sources from warehouses greater than 100,000 square feet. The South Coast approach with their rule is similar to the district's ISR rule, in that it requires clean air design elements to reduce NOx and particulate emissions, and then a mitigation fee payment as needed to achieve remaining rule requirements. It differs in a couple of ways. For example, the district's ISR rule applies to new construction and operational emissions from various development types. For example, residential, commercial, warehouse, and other non-residential developments. In the spirit of the ongoing evaluation of Rule 9510, this last legislative session, Assembly Bill 98 Carrillo-Reyes was signed into law, which prescribes various statewide warehouse design and building standards for any proposed new or expanded warehouse development, such as solar setback and buffer requirements, signage, and just to name a few. The district continues to evaluate the ISR program as the state's mobile source regulations continue to drive new technology and emission reductions. Over the years, the district has had significant success achieving emission reductions under ISR, including reductions achieved through offsite mitigation fees as described earlier. Since 2008, the collection rate to mitigate emissions has been $9,350 per ton of NOx and $9,011 for PM10. That's still the same rate today. The evaluation of these fees will be critical in ensuring the dollars collected by the district in the future are sufficient to achieve and administer the required emission reductions under ISR. In addition, the cost of emission reductions through the funding of clean air projects has been steadily on the rise. As more clean alternative technologies become available, the cost effectiveness is expected to continue to increase. Over the last 3 years, the cost effectiveness for ISR has been roughly $22,000 per ton. And the year to date, the cost effectiveness for ISR is about $38,000 per ton. As a point of reference, cost effectiveness for the Carl Moyer program was recently increased by CARB to $60,000 per ton for conventional diesel to diesel replacement and $120,000 per ton for diesel to zero emission replacement projects. Therefore, all that to say, to ensure the dollars collected by the district are sufficient to achieve and administer the required emission reductions under ISR, the district plans to reevaluate these fees in 2025 through the process specified in Rule 9510. This concludes my hopefully short and brief presentation this morning. Turn it back to the chair and CAC. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments in Modesto? Bakersfield?
I have a couple of
Go ahead.
questions here. I probably need to be a little bit better, but I see the cost per ton for NOx. I see it's increasing because of inflation and stuff. But I'm curious, how do you get the tonnage of pollution or NOx per ton? What is it? Is it like, say, a vehicle burns 100 gallons of fuel and it saves, you get a new vehicle that saves 60 gallons, and you use it to measure between the two, how much fuel you use, or is it a gas that's produced by the vehicle or a business? How do you come up with that 1 ton or all these tons on here, and then the cost for each ton? That's where I have a question on that. I need to be enlightened on how we have accomplished it, and how do you measure it, or how did you measure it as a layman on this? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Just a quick, let me know if it doesn't answer the question. I'll give you a very quick version of it. So on the emission reduction side, every project that's funded undergoes a very robust kind of methodology for funding. And so I'll just give you an example. If you replace a tractor, you have a very specific old tractor that is a certain tier level, certain year model. There's certain emissions that are associated with that specific tractor based on how old it is. There are emission factors that are called that are established for, basically for every year, every model. And then we also look at, like you just mentioned, Mr. Cryer, how often that tractor was used, how much fuel was burned, how many hours it was operated. Then you go to the new vehicle that's replacing the old tractor, and it might be, say, a tier 4 final. So it has emissions that are also established for that new tractor, how many hours it is to be used. We verify all of this through the funding process. And then at the end, there's actually reporting that goes on as well. Typically, there's a 10-year project life on a project like that, meaning that we're working with that grower to understand, the use of that tractor on an ongoing basis. And there's actually interaction that's occurring between us and that project participant. Includes destroying the old tractor, includes verifying the new tractor was put into service. So all of that's a long way of basically saying that every project, there's verification of both the old and the new equipment that's being put into place, along with its use, with calculations about how much emissions used to occur, how much emissions are now going to be occurring with a newer technology. And then the difference of that is then also compared to the cost, right, of the dollars that are put into the project. And that's where you get the dollars per ton on both sides of that equation.
My follow-up question would be I've been a beneficiary of probably having about 30 tractors
by 20 booster pumps and regular well pumps, through the Moyer program. And so I have a lot of experience in that. But so basically, it's the amount of savings on fuel, basically, what you're saving. They're basing the cost per the savings to get the tons.
There may be some fuel savings, but the real big savings on the tonnage, on the emissions reduction side, the real big savings is really the change in technology as well, right? So if you're going from like a tier 0, maybe a 1970s or an 80s vintage tractor to like a tier 4 final tractor, say, as a new tractor, you're actually getting an over 96-97% reduction just from technology, right? Even if you use the exact same amount of fuel, the technology itself is that much cleaner when you go from older to newer technology. So most of the savings are going to come actually from actual change in technology. Although fuel savings can be a factor as well.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting on that part there. As far I'm sure our equipment is putting out less pollution and stuff, but how do you, I don't know, visualize? This is, not to make any fun of the fact or lightheartedness of it. How do you visibly see what 1 ton looks like of pollution, or how do you measure it? Well, there's a visual to it, or just basically it's a gas that you try to that's coming out of the engine or whatever piece of equipment to accomplish that, all the tons of stuff that we're saving in pollution. That's to me, if I have a good answer to it, and I can explain it to all my other grower friends and stuff, and in our conversation, because it's like a mystery to everybody on that, and that's what I'm just coming across at.
That's a great question. Mr. Jet, one last quick comment is that these technologies are certified to different emissions levels. And so when, say, a John Deere tier 4 final tractor is put into service, that specific engine would have been tested in labs, in service over many hours. What you're basically doing is you're establishing emissions levels for different engines over different horsepower ranges, over different use. And those are actually tested with equipment, with samplers. You're actually looking at you're testing the pollution actually coming out of the exhaust pipe or the exhaust stack in those cases. And so you actually have pretty good data actually on what the emissions levels are coming from different types of equipment. And those are established up front. So like the Moyer program is just, since you mentioned the Moyer program, the guidelines themselves actually have tables established in them that actually articulate, based on all that test data, if you have this size tractor, these are, of this vintage, this year, these are what the emissions are going to be. A new tier 4 final in this size is going to be these emissions. You can compare those two things, but all that data is derived from actual emissions tests that are done on tractors. And those are continually being updated over time based on the latest data, load factors, how often is that equipment used, at what load is it used? Those are all different factors that are studied on an ongoing basis and actually tested out in the field. So I can give you more information on that, but it's not, it's based on science. They're not, they're not guesses. They're actually established and recognized by us, the state, and EPA. So I think they're pretty good estimates.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Samir, I think the question was, when it comes to a ton, is it a ton of weight or a ton of clear air? What is a ton?
Yeah, so it is a ton of weight, and so these are pretty large numbers, right? So when you say 20,000 tons of particulate matter reduced, imagine a ton of something you put in a truck, right? And a ton of material.
Right.
That's how much pollution is actually being. Now, one project may yield pounds of reduction, hundreds of pounds for a very good, and then you add that up over many projects and you get to tons, right? So, but these are large amounts that are being reflected here.
Well, it's a ton of smoke.
Yep, smoke's got weight. Add it up.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I've got a quick question, if I may.
Go ahead.
In looking at this report concerning the indirect source review, on page 9, there's reference to South County Air Quality Management District, which is based out of Diamond Bar. How does that fit into this?
Yeah, so the context here is, as we just keep looking at the program, and this is just something that we always do for every area that we operate in. We always look around to see what are other people doing, what's working, what's not working, right? It's which is, I want to be very clear about that we were really the only area in the country who was able to develop a functional, cost-effective, indirect source review program. And the only change that's happened recently was a couple of years ago, the South Coast Air Quality Management District did ultimately adopt a program that is a bit different, and it's recognized here on the slide. It is a bit different than ours, and we try to point out some of those differences. And really all that Mark is saying here is that on an ongoing basis, as we keep looking toward the new standards, it's always good to be aware of what other areas are doing to see what is working and what's not working. And that evaluation continues. We really have no findings at this point to share. It's just more of an observation that they're very early, by the way, even though it was adopted in 2021, they're just getting going on implementation of that program. And so we are taking a look at that and just seeing how's it working? Is there anything that comes out of it that's of interest to the Valley? That obviously that's going to require engagement, going to our board if at some point there was anything there that was, this is just more for context. So that happened. There's also a bill that was passed that also added some new requirements. Just important for everybody to be aware of that.
So the relevance is that someone else is following the lead of what this district is.
That's correct. Yeah. And they actually took a lot of lessons learned, and things that for many years now, they integrated that into their rule, but they also added some things. And so we're still kind of watching to see how that plays out.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Manuel here, comment on the question that was brought up regarding the South Coast Air Basin. Yes, they do have an ISR rule. And I will say this as an individual, not CAC. Thank God for the Air District's communications with industry and businesses and counties. The South Air Coast Basin ISR rule is a walking disaster of destruction to businesses and warehouses. That's all I will say, okay? We've been heavily involved, even with our ports, telling off how to unload a ship, how many containers can be removed from that ship at a time. So the South Coast has definitely gone beyond a rule. They've become a dictatorship. Now, let me go to CAC. Real quick, the solar farms fall into this rule, Samir, these big solar farms that we've been putting in lately, taking valuable farmland. And we could be putting it on warehouses, these mega warehouses, but does that fall into the arena?
Yes, they do fall under the 9,000 square feet of space. And typically we would model mostly the construction impacts from those projects. We'd evaluate the operational as well, but it's minimal. Routine maintenance, panel washing, that kind of thing.
That's super. Okay, the last question. Do we fund under the money we get for this ISR, are we funding cars that are multi-fuel? Because some workers or individuals going to operations don't have electric hookups. So do we fund cars that run on fuel and electric due to the individual's location of their job? Do we fund those, or do we just only fund an electric car?
No,
the regular cart program you do.
So on the ISR side of the mitigation, we will look at any mitigation measure that's above and beyond the averages that are out there, right? So that could involve electric, that could involve other alternative fuels, and we'll provide credit. And if there's any emissions reductions available under whatever fuel is fuel neutral, we'll take a look at that there. Now, on the mitigation fee side, once a developer is not in the situation where they're not able to fully mitigate on site and they do provide that fee, and you saw that last year there was about $4.9 million provided between ISR and the VERA, the voluntary agreements that are proposed to us. In those cases, those funds are used for a variety of programs. And I think there was a list of examples there, but it could be everything from a diesel tractor replacement, which obviously is not an electric project. It could be a residential wood burning device going to propane, or natural gas device. that's obviously not an electric, so there's, as long as we can achieve quantifiable, permanent emissions reductions from the project, to the earlier question that was raised, quantifiable, follows the guidelines, methodologies that are established. We're just looking for reductions to mitigate these different increases that are happening under some of these development projects. And so far we've been able to do that, but it's just getting the last closing point was, the fee hasn't changed in, almost 20 years now. So it's getting harder and harder over time to do that, when don't change it. So we're going to be looking at that this year for sure.
Last question I have is, of these monies that are for the VEER projects that people have agreed to give money and right, is the private sector, let's use the correct term, private schools is my big entity. My biggest concern has been for 20 years, this air district with the state. Is our private schools eligible for any of these funds to help them get into an electric bus or those type of things? And the answer, I already see your answer and I know your answer. And I was just praying that your answer could have been, yeah, maybe.
Just for the other members' benefit, I was shaking my head because unfortunately, under California Constitution, the funds coming through us means that they cannot go to private schools. There's a very specific constitutional clause on that matter. And we're going to keep looking for funding opportunities there.
Thank you.
Especially between, I think there's ways for private entities to partner with, if the money goes through a public agency, that's where that issue becomes an issue. So in this program, there's really no opportunity for that.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Les Clark down Kirk County.
Go ahead.
With the fiasco of the Kern County CEQA attempt, it's still ongoing. How the funding, how does that work? Does the funding go, or our projects go directly to you all at the district, or does it go to the county then to the district? How's that work?
Les, yeah, thank you. I think you're referring to the oil and gas, the programmatic EIR that was done.
Right.
Yeah, so there was a phase of that where until the latest court outcomes that I don't want to characterize those here just because I'd be speaking out of memory and may get it wrong, but up until the point that the latest kind of orders came out of the courts, whatever funding was collected by the county and then provided to us for the purpose of mitigation under that programmatic EIR, we used to achieve that mitigation. Now that as you know, there was a challenge, and I think the county is still continuing to go back and do whatever they need to do to respond to whatever the ruling on that challenge was. So there isn't, at this point, there is no ongoing, I'm looking at Mark to confirm this, he's nodding, so I think I'm getting this right, but yeah, there is no ongoing mitigation until there's a resolution put into place by the county in response to the outcome of the court.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. If no more questions or comments, let's move on to AB 617 information updates. Stephanie?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year. My name is Stephanie Ng, and I'm a program manager in our Community Strategies and Resources Department, here to provide you an update on AB 617 implementation since our last meeting. We continue to meet with all 4 of the CARP selected community steering committees to implement AB 617 across the whole valley. As a reminder, those communities are Shafter, South Central Fresno, Stockton, and then the community of Arvin and Lamont. And as you all are aware, and as you heard from my update in last month, 2 of our Valley Year 1 communities, and so that's Fresno and Shafter, are approaching their 5th year, which is the timeframe for the Community Emissions Reduction Program, or CERP. And that's based on state law, and they'll reach that milestone in February of 2025, which is coming up really soon here. To celebrate this milestone and to continue working with both of these communities on wrapping up the commitments in that SERP, we are planning for in-person meetings in each of those respective communities to really celebrate the work that's been completed. And like I mentioned, wrap up kind of the work that we've kind of built up to in the past 5 years here. And again, I know I've mentioned it in the past, but these in-person meetings are just a really good opportunity for us to meet face-to-face with community members, share a meal with them, and just kind of, I think, collectively work together to kind of wrap up, again, those commitments in the SERP. As we are kicking off the new year, another thing that we're really excited about is that we are planning a combined lawnmower exchange and tune-up event in the Arvin Lamont community. These events have really come a long way. I know I shared updates over the past year about some of the other events we've held in other communities. And we're excited to have partnered with Valley Can to be able to bring together really two really high priority and important district programs to these communities. And thanks to the overwhelming popularity and high demand we held an event last year in Lamont, we are anticipating this event to be oversubscribed, which we're really excited about because, again, these events they really play an important role in reducing barriers to participating in our district programs and then also to reducing local emissions. And those are all the updates I have for today. And I know we typically have a CARB update lined up for you. Unfortunately, our representative from CARB couldn't make it, so they will follow up in email with some written updates.
Okay.
Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions in Modesto? Nope. Bakersfield. Fresno? All right, Stephanie, thank you.
Thank you.
Outreach and communications report, Jamie.
I will be quick. I just want to let everyone know that in all regions, we have our annual kids calendar for 2025. Please pick some up and give them to your constituents, take them to your offices. They feature the artwork of 14 youth here in the Valley, up and down the Valley. Depending on what their parents approved for us, you can see them and their photo and their name and school, depending on what their parent approved us to include. That's it.
All right, thank you.
And they're right outside the hallways in, should be, or in the front lobby in all the regions.
I need a case to take to the private school in Sanger, and 139 of them. So I need 139 before I leave today.
Since this
To
wasn't
the private school.
state money, we even have some of the winners that are from private schools.
Manuel, can I have 2 for my grandchildren, for God's sake? Is that okay? Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, we are to CAC member comments. Let's start with Bakersfield. Any comments in Bakersfield? None. Fresno?
Yes, I have one small comment, request. It's really small. I would like to know if CARB can present to this CAC the 8 waivers filed to EPA that they have filed over the last couple of years. I'd like to know if we could have a presentation and a list of all those waivers that they apply under the Clean Air Act for dealing with mobile on and off-road equipment, et cetera, including boats, aircraft that still stay in the air if the battery runs down. But I am requesting if we can get that, if that's possible. And Mr. Chairman, I would hope that that is available because CARB did request those waivers, and they have to go through quite a process to the administrator of EPA and DC. So that would be my request. And Samir, I don't know if there's a comment from the district, if that's possible, or if I'm just asking for something that's never going to happen.
Mr. Chair, I was just checking with Katrina here about whether or not CARB was still on. They're not on the line, but we're happy to send that to them in writing. There may be information available in writing as well back. So part of the question for the members here as well is whether, if do you want this strictly to be an agenda item, or do you want to see information shared as between meetings here from CARB if they're able to produce that information?
Both.
Okay, so we'll put so I heard a comment here about having this be an agenda item request for February. So, Mr. Chair, if that's your direction or consensus
Yeah.
on that, we're happy to put that in writing for CARB.
That's fine. Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments?
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Modesto. No comments in Modesto.
I do have
Oh,
comments.
Jose, go ahead.
On item 7, when there was some discussions on publicizing the accomplishments that the CAC has accomplished to other people that doesn't really know. But what I'm doing right now is like a publication from Katrina and then Denny Gonzalez. I forward those to the Board of Supervisors and to the mayors for the county of Merced. And we can do that. We can do that ourselves. We can also help to publicize the accomplishments that we do. Okay, and then for item 7, when we were talking about CARB and AB 253, this is not a question, but this is just a comment. Was CARB involved when the SB 253 was voted on to pass? It's just a comment. For the calendars, I already have a box. I already got a box this morning, and that's got to be distributed to the supervisors and the mayors and the Board of Supervisors. I mean the superintendent of schools for our county. You can do that also.
Okay, is that it?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, last item. Volunteer to present report during governing board meeting. Manuel, would you like to do that again?
Absolutely, young man.
All
I
right.
would be honored.
All right. Okay, without anything else, gone, adjourned.